Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is time for the event that everyone's been looking forward to all week, and it's only 2 days into the week, and that is the Fantasy Football Buzz Podcast quarterback edition tonight here on The Buzz. We've got, as usual, Cyclop. We've got 2020 down there. Guys, how's it going?
I'm pumped, man. I'm excited to talk positions, really start getting into the meat and potatoes of what we do on the show, breaking things down. You know, we got training camp starting in 6 weeks. I'm just excited. I'm excited to talk some football.
Why is it always meat and potatoes with you?
Seriously?
Okay, don't underestimate.
Okay, sorry.
It's meat and potatoes.
It's quinoa and couscous. Is that better? We're going to go there?
I think we need to understand what our target audience is.
Yeah, good point.
And stick with the meat and potatoes.
It's like beer and whiskey.
Exactly.
So it's been a good week. Things are happening. Things are starting to happen a little bit around camp. You know, players are getting arrested.
Shot.
Players are, coming out as gay, which is an incredible thing. There's a lot of interesting things happening.
Yeah, it's funny. If we can veer off track for a second and talk about the Carl Nassib issue, and it's interesting because back when Cleveland was featured on Hard Knocks, if you remember a few years ago, Carl was on the Browns. He was their defensive end, and he was having a wonderful camp, or at least it looked like it at Hard Knocks. And he was the one guy on that defense at the time who was actually doing something. And then at the end of training camp, he was let go. And I remember Joan and I were like, what? Like, this was their guy, and never know what happened. I'm glad that he was eventually picked up and now playing for the Raiders. But the one thing when looking at a lot of the comments on his Twitter announcement, and the people that are saying, why do you have to make this announcement? Why can't it just be, you are what you are? And that's why he made that announcement, because there are people, the quote unquote all lives matter people came out and were saying, oh, you don't have to tell us about your sexuality, not realizing how many lives Carl probably saved yesterday, because the suicide rates among homosexual teenagers is the highest in the country among teenagers. And it's from homosexuals. And if it takes one guy to make an announcement like that to help, even if it's only one person, kudos, man, kudos.
Right. I mean, think about how many lives 2020 saved when he came out.
All right.
I didn't really come out. I just turned the light on. But I love that stuff, because athletes, yes, they play. They're the best of the best of the best, but they get an opportunity if they take it to be bigger than the game and let the game be bigger than them. And they have a stage, and I think it's absolutely awesome. And I think it's great. It's funny. I heard a quote today on NFL radio that this is the time of year right now in the next 6 weeks that GMs are the most panicked, because the players go, and this is when you saw what happened with Walker in Kansas City. He got pulled over with guns in his car, and this is when crazy stuff happens. They have the OTAs, and they'll go back for 6 weeks, and GMs are panicking as to what is going to happen over the next 6 weeks until they come back and get on the practice field. It's an interesting time.
Yeah, and going back to with him coming out and saying he's gay, and he's a quiet person, and he's not a in your face person and whatnot. And he had this whole thing, but what they're saying is they hope to make it a time where it shouldn't matter about making a statement. But the reality is these days that's still part of our society. As much as we're working towards it and it's getting better, it's just a reality. And but the cool thing is his jersey sales jumped up to number 1 in jersey sales for today, which is amazing and awesome.
And
and if he was on the Dolphins, I'd probably buy one, but because he's on the Raiders, no way.
It's almost like think about what our ratings would do if the world found out that, Brad, you're special needs. I mean, these are the things, these are the opportunities we take to capitalize on.
And the NFL is embraced. I mean, other than probably Zach Wilson and his mom, I think everybody's embracing what Carl did, and hopefully it'll go forward and be an inspiration for a lot of people.
Awesome.
Let's talk about what our night's going to look like. Okay, we're going to start off tonight. We said is quarterback night, so we're going to talk about which quarterbacks you should have on your fantasy football team, which quarterbacks are going to underachieve, overachieve, who are your sleepers, who are the guys that you're going to draft high, and unfortunately they're not going to do well. And so hopefully we can give you a little bit of that insight tonight. We're going to let 2020 run the show with regard to quarterbacks tonight. Of course, throughout the show, we're going to take your calls, and we'll put the number up there in a second. And also throughout the show, if you have any comments, you have any questions, and you're too shy to call us, go ahead and put your comment in Facebook Live or YouTube Live, and it'll pop up on our screen, and we'll be able to get it on live and answer your question right here in the studios before we do anything else. We'll just break in and let you know what's going on. But first and foremost, we started a new segment tonight that we're going to do every night throughout the summer and possibly throughout the season, and it's going to be called the Kenneth Question of the Night, because Kenneth from Texas is one of our biggest fans, if not the biggest fan of the Buzz podcast. And last week he threw out a really good question. We said, you know what? Let's see what Kenneth has to say and bring out a question that not only are we going to try to answer, but we're hopefully going to get you all to answer as well. And again, we'll throw out the number in a second. But first, let's say hello to Kenneth. How are you tonight, Kenneth?
Pretty good. And as I understand from one of y'all, I was given the opportunity to pose my question of the night.
Yep.
And my question of the night just happens to come from NFL Total Access.
Okay.
I heard this question asked earlier, and I thought it was quite interesting. Which player or players, I should say, do you see having the biggest impact with their new team?
Great question.
Excellent question. And this year there's a lot of them.
Right.
So
are we going to answer that now? Or are we going to go through the show?
We can start answering the question now, and then throughout the show, we could bring up that, as it comes up and we talk about certain players, whether it's Matt Stafford or whatever it is, we can.
We're going to say that.
We're both going right there. That's funny.
Oh, I'm sorry. Look, we talked
really
about
funny.
free agency a few weeks ago. I've always had a little man crush on Matt Stafford. I just feel like with the and it's similar to Barry Sanders, and it's coincidentally the same team. That here's a guy who has so much talent, was kind of stuck on a team without the talent around him. And yes, he had Megatron, and there was some talent which gave him a household name, but never got to that next level. So I threw up the questions on the screen. Which player or players do you see having the biggest impact with their new team, other than Matt Stafford, guys?
Yeah.
Or somebody else that you're thinking about?
Well, I will tell you, you could go to Julio Jones.
Mm-hmm.
He not that they had a bad receiving core, but you take a guy like Julio Jones and plug him into that system, and that has a great running game.
Right.
And you can't be doubling them that much when you have Derrick Henry in the backfield.
Right.
So that makes it very, very interesting for if there's always the if at this point, he can stay healthy, that he could really change that team.
All right. Well, Kenneth, what do you think?
I have to agree with whoever brought up Julio Jones.
That was Cyclop.
But also, I also want to toss in one Johnny Smith, who I believe signed on with the Jets.
He went to New England, and he's actually paired up with Hunter Henry.
Right.
And we don't know at this point if it'll be Matt Jones throwing to him or Cam Newton throwing to him, and how he's going to actually fit into that system. Look, he's not Gronk, right? And neither is Hunter Henry, and they're going to use both of them. So I don't know. New England's going to be an interesting team this year that unfortunately we'll be watching. But it will be interesting. What about you, 2020? Do you have anybody other than
Yeah,
Stafford?
you know, and it would be Julio Jones if it wasn't for the fact that Ryan Tannehill throws the least amount of passes out of almost any quarterback in football. Still puts up good numbers, but believe it or not, I'm going to go with Kenny Galladay. I think he's that stud receiver that they've been needing in New York. You know, that offensive line is going to be a little better, but I still think they're going to have trouble running the ball. And he's just a talent. This is a guy, I mean, he had Matt Stafford throwing him the ball, and I do have a man crush on Stafford. I think Kenny Galladay is going to have a pretty big impression on that offense. He should be the wide receiver one, and I think Jones is going to look for him early and often.
Well, here, you know, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not as definitive. I love saying you're wrong, but in this case, I can't say you're wrong definitively. But, you know, the question, we talked about this a few weeks ago with the Giants being the fourth worst passing team in the league last year, and they only threw for 189 yards a game. And the question was whether or not that was because they didn't have the weapons or because that is their offensive scheme. We know that Barkley got hurt, so safeties were able to cheat up, right? They didn't have to worry about what was happening on that end. They did have the second worst offensive line in the league last year. They didn't do anything significant to make that line any better. So other than getting Barkley back, it's still Daniel Jones. So who knows? And
that's
also,
the problem.
look, Galladay, is he healthy again? Is he back, you know, to where he was a year ago instead of last year when he more or less took a vacation?
We're getting a lot of feedback.
That's legit.
We're getting a lot of feedback.
So that is legit. If Galladay is healthy, that is the difference maker. There's just a lot of mouths to feed over in Tennessee. And again, it's a quarterback that does not put the ball up. I hear you about that offense. It's a dreadful offense. I just think they're going to improve.
Keith, can you turn yours off to see if it's your?
It is, but when I'm not talking, I'll mute out. But when I'm talking, it's nothing I can do about it.
So I'm going to throw out two names that could have huge impacts on their teams. Okay, and they're like sleeper impact players. I'm going to go with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I'm going to go with Sam Darnold. Now, I know he was a Jet, but I know you guys are shaking your heads, and I said these are sleeper move team impacts.
Really tired. Yeah, okay.
But you look at those two, it's a long shot. I get that. But I'm going to throw those out there as some long shots.
Okay, no, I don't think Fitzpatrick is a long shot. As a matter of fact, out of all the players we mentioned, and you know what, I just was not registering about that move. I honestly think of everyone we just spoke about, Fitzpatrick is going to definitively have by far the greatest impact on that team. He's got weapons. That's a great defense. It's a good offensive line. I think more than any of the wide receivers we just spoke about, definitely not. Did you really just say Seth? Really? Sam Darnold?
I didn't say it.
No, I'm saying, Seth, can you believe this guy said that?
No, I don't believe it. Well, you know what? It's Brad. But look, I don't believe it. And I will tell you this about Fitzy, and I love Fitzy, and when he was down here, he did so much for us and for the community as well. And I'm not putting him down, but there's a reason why he's been on so many teams. If we're talking strictly about fantasy football, he will put up some numbers similar to what he did with the Bucks a few years ago when he just went off and he was having 400-yard games at one after the other.
And then he fell off the rails.
But that is the Fitz
Right.
modus operandi, right?
Right.
That's going to happen. He's going to throw probably, almost as many interceptions as touchdowns. He takes a lot of chances. It's a new system for him. Yes, they have the sixth best offensive line in the league. Yes, they've got Scary Terry and they've got Curtis Samuel now and Adam Humphries. But I'm just saying, be careful. He can't be your QB1 to rely on for the season. I think he'll have some really good games, and you'll be happy that you have him, that you can plug him in. But he's really got to be your 1A, your 1B or your 2, at least in my opinion. But if we're talking quarterbacks other than Stafford that'll have an impact, you guys keep forgetting about Carson Wentz. And I think his failures in Philly were more a reflection of that line and that system than they were anything else. Look, when all you do is throw to your tight ends, there's a reason for that. You don't have wide receivers. You don't have
They don't have
true
any
game
wide
plan.
outs there. Yeah.
However, he's going to Indy, and yes, I know Pascal and Pittman and Campbell, they're not great. T.Y. Hilton could come back to form. I know he's old. They have an incredible offensive line, but I see Carson Wentz being able to step in. And if you're going to look at a quarterback between Fitzy and Wentz and Darnold and Goff, I think Wentz out of those. Of course, Stafford number
I would
one.
agree with that.
Now on the wide receiver
Wait,
front,
hold
let
on
me
a
ask you guys a question.
But before you go anywhere,
Yeah.
Hold on.
before we go anywhere, I think, and if here's one of our fun bets that we're going to do, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick has a better fantasy year than Carson Wentz.
All right, write it down.
I'll take that bet.
I'll take that. I'll take it too.
All right, so we have a question from Anthony about quarterbacks. Will Tom Brady be better in his second year in Tampa Bay? So let's look at Brady. We were going to go through quarterbacks tonight, and we're going to obviously work on that. Brady had 40. Where was that? 4,600 and 33 yards last year. 40 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. He was 43 years old. He's going to be 44 going into this year, I believe. And I mean, I've been saying he's going to fall off a cliff for 10 years with this guy. It just doesn't happen. He gets better. His weapons are still there. He's got, they kept the whole team together. Once he finally figured out the offense, look at his numbers for the second half of the season, and especially the last quarter of the season, and then obviously on the Super Bowl run. They're ridiculous. They're better than any 25-year-old quarterback that's out there.
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and I can't disagree with anything that you're saying. Brady was incredible last year. I think he's going to be incredible this year. The only thing is this team might have gotten better. It's one of the first times I think ever in the Super Bowl era that a team kept all of its starters. They have another year together. That defense is fantastic. They've got a good running game. My only concern is they're going to be blowing teams out. Will Brady need to be going for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns? With Bill Belichick at the throttle, putting on the gas, that's the way it is. Well, Bruce Arians is a little like
he's
that.
The same way.
He's the same way,
if not more.
So you know what? I think he's going to put fairly close numbers, maybe a little bit of a regression, not because he isn't any good and not because he can't do it and doesn't have the tools. I just think they're going to another year together. This team is just going to be, one of the favorites to get there again and just pummel teams into the ground.
Yeah, we've been writing off Brady, trying to write him off for years, right? Especially because we're Dolphin fans and he was in New England, but he just keeps staying steady.
I'm so tired,
especially with the weapons he has. In his last few years in New England, he really had nothing. So and then he goes and he's got Mike Evans and he's got all these weapons, and it's just you just don't see a big fall off. Go ahead.
Put the rubber where the road is. Would you be willing to have Tom Brady confidently as your QB number 1 on your fantasy football team?
Oh,
yes,
absolutely.
No.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's going to be. It's where would I draft him is a different story, but I would love to have him as a QB1, getting him 4th, 5th round or later.
Okay, so I have him as my number 13 quarterback. All right, that means in a 10 or a 12 team league, he is not a number 1 quarterback. Does that mean I wouldn't mind having him on my team? Absolutely not. But his strength of schedule is 20 as of now. Of course, it's going on last year, so a lot of things change. Is 26, so he's in that bottom third of strength of schedule, which makes him fall out of the top 10 or 12 for me as far as starting quarterbacks.
Yeah, I
think there's 10 or 12 that will consistently put up better numbers than him.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brad. I have him as my QB 11. I'm not suggesting that he's not going to do well. He'll have, I think, what did he have last year? About 360 points. I think he'll get to that again. I think it'll be very similar to what he did last year. But because of the number of quarterbacks this year that are QB1 level, I have him as a QB 11. I would not. If I'm gonna take Brady, it wouldn't be until the 11th round, and I'm a late quarterback drafter. So that tells you something. And we'll get in more in depth. I have Mahomes in the 4th round, so that's me. I'm a late quarterback drafter. But I agree, Brad. I think there's a bunch of quarterbacks that I would take above him, but that doesn't mean that he can't have a great year and that he can't produce points week in and week out.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about it.
If you're going to have a backup quarterback on your team, or if you wait long enough and backup quarterback start going before you take your first quarterback and he ends up on your team, you're not crying about it.
Right.
You're just praying he doesn't get hurt. Like every quarterback, but the guy's in great shape. He takes care of his body. Hey,
Keith, did you say you would draft? You have him as a QB6? That you would draft him as the 6th? I guess he's muted. So
I have Tom Brady at 9.
You have a 9. Okay, so 9, 11, 12. So we're all about in the same area. Okay. But let me ask you this before we go deep in, and thank you, by the way, Anthony, for the question. Before we go deep into the quarterback segment, which we're going to do in a second, we already have one bet, right, about Wentz versus Fitzpatrick.
Yep.
What about, we were talking about wide receivers. We were talking about which wide receivers are going to have the biggest impact.
Yeah, we had 3 in order between Waddle, Chase, and Smith. We had to put them in order, right?
We had to put right.
Oh, right. That was last week when I called in, or I was typing in. Yes.
Okay. Well, hopefully we got that one ready to go. But I'm talking about free agents. We were talking about Kenny Galladay and the impact that he was going to have on the Giants. And I, and yes, I'm representing, but I really think that Will Fuller is going to surprise a lot of people. And I'm willing to say, Brad, since you picked Kenny Galladay on the wide receiver side, that Fuller will actually have a better fantasy football season than Kenny Galladay. Are you ready?
Actually, that was 2020, not me who picked Galladay.
Oh, okay. All right.
I said Julio Jones.
Okay, that's fair. So I don't know, 2020, if you're ready to lose another $1, but you willing to say that Kenny Galladay is going to have a better year fantasy-wise than Will Fuller?
It's a tough call because they are going nuts for Fuller in Miami. They loved him in the OTAs and the locker room is so behind him. That's a tough call.
All right, that's fair. Yeah. I mean, okay, that's fair.
It's a pick 'em. We weren't talking about that when we were spreading it out. I wasn't even thinking about that Will Fuller will have a big impact on it. There's a lot of mouths to feed there with Waddle, and they're saying Albert Wilson looks good. You still got Williams and Parker, a lot of mouths to feed, but and Tua is a question mark. So, but Daniel Jones is Daniel Jones. I'm gonna leave that one alone, Commish.
Okay, so before we get to our quarterback segment, Kenneth is back on the phone, and then I'm going to put my trivia question up there because I am prepared this week for it.
All right.
And then we'll get into the quarterbacks. Kenneth, how you doing?
Pretty good. Now you don't have to answer this question now, but I do have a question that I would like to pose ahead of next week. But you don't have to answer it now if you don't want to. The question I have is this. Now, every year we know that there's a change in the teams that make the playoffs, right? 6 teams go in, 6 go out every year. The question I have is this. Which teams that made it last year do you see not making it this year, and which teams that didn't make it in do you see get in?
All right, so that's a great question. I think we save that for next week, but I think that's a great question, and I would love to explore that because, at this point, it's a little difficult without even knowing what's going on. But if we're going to look at any fantasy perspective and which free agents and draftees these teams took, we can take a look at that next week and kind of put a fantasy angle on that as well. But let's do this, guys. Let me go ahead and throw the trivia question out there, and then we can then go into our quarterback segment. So the trivia question, as soon as I can find it, I thought I had actually put it, but I must have erased it. Sorry, guys.
That's what I read.
Okay, here's the question. Who are the only 3 wide receivers who caught 100+ passes in a season who were never originally drafted before coming to the league? So in other words, free agents that made it on the teams and caught over 100 passes in a season. There's only been 3 of them, guys. And one of them did it twice. So just throwing that out there, I'll go ahead and I'll put it up as our trivia. There we go. And I don't know if you guys are thinking of anybody, but yeah, you guys can think about it. Anybody who's watching or listening, if you think you have an answer, go ahead and put your answer in the comment section in Facebook Live or YouTube Live, or give us a call, 772-800-BUZZ, and we will talk to you on the air. All right, we promised, we said, this is quarterback night. We're going to get into quarterbacks. And what we did is we asked 2020, our very own 2020, to come up with his list of quarterbacks that he thinks would be the guys that we need to keep an eye on, that we can draft. So we're going to jump right into it. And 2020, it's all yours.
He's on mute, and it was actually my list.
Oh, that's your list?
But that's okay. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought 2020. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so no, that's perfect, though. So that's perfect. So we're looking at our top 15, and this is fine. This is in Cyclops order, and we can work with this because we're all going to have a little bit of moving around here. We're gonna jostle a little bit, but I think arguably this is going to round out our top 15. So the question that I want to tackle here with these top 15 quarterbacks is, of these top 15, based on what their average draft position is going to be, and we could talk about what that ADP is, who, based on their ADP, would you want on your team? So I'm going to start with you, Cyclop. Based on what their average ADP is, who would you want of these guys? I mean, obviously, I can't just ask you who you want because you're going to say Patrick Mahomes. We're all going to say Patrick Mahomes. Of
course.
That's right. So based on what an average draft position, what you're going to have to invest to get one of these guys, who would you want and where would you take them?
So I know I keep going back to last year, and as the commish says, we a lot of us wait on quarterbacks. There's usually a couple big quarterbacks that'll go, and then it's kind of a waiting game, right? You start to get into the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th rounds, and you start taking quarterbacks, except for Mahomes. And last year it was Jackson, my mistake, and a few players like that. And then maybe like a Rodgers will go. And then it's kind of a waiting game. So
Jackson was not a mistake, by the way. It was a mistake where you drafted him. But it wasn't a mistake. But go ahead.
It was for me personally, in my draft theories for many years.
Okay, fair enough.
I felt I got excited about it. I did it. And then as if he would have panned out and had his 45 points a game, except for a couple off games or something like the year before, I would have looked like a genius, right?
Yeah.
But instead, he basically was very average or below average for a good part of the season until I dumped him off on you, Commish.
Right. And got me to the Super Bowl because of it.
Exactly. But
okay, so ADP versus projection, where which of these guys are you ready to grab thinking they're going to drop and you're ready to pull the trigger?
I'm looking at excuse me, I know we're going back to it, but Matt Stafford.
Okay.
I just think he's going to a new team. I think he's going to be rejuvenated. He's getting off of the Detroit Lions roster. He's going to a team with some really good receivers, a good running game. And I think as long as he stays healthy, will be explosive there. And I think he'll be putting up really good, solid, consistent numbers.
His ADP, by the way, is 87.3. So in 10-person leagues, that means
That's
he's being
8th
drafted
round.
in the 9th round.
9th round. Okay, and I that's probably about right. But maybe you move up and get him in the 7th round.
Right.
Right. And that's probably a fair place for him. You already have your running backs, your wide receivers. You get into your quarterback, you pick him before you pick, your 3rd or 4th running back.
Yeah.
So that's someone who I would look to jump up and get.
All right. So I don't know if you're going to ask me next who I
Yes,
would.
I'm sorry, I forgot that I was in mute. Same question.
Okay,
Based
well,
on their ADP, who
Yeah.
do you want? Who are you targeting?
Well, this is pretty easy for me. And I think I'm ready to pull the trigger again on Dak Prescott. And I think because of his injury, people have forgotten about Dak. And if you look at what he did last year, game 2, 502 yards. Game 3, 472 yards. Game 4, 450 yards. This was week after week after week. And then he got hurt in game 5. Okay. And that was the end of that. So there's no reason for me to think, especially with those receivers, that he can't do this again. So I'm all in on Dak, and I'm willing. Right now his ADP is 50, which means end of the 5th round, beginning of the 6th round. That's probably where I would take him.
Yeah, but that's not you jumping up to get him. That's saying I'll take him in that 5th round. Are you willing to go to him in the 3rd or 4th round?
But the question is, based on their ADP,
will he end up?
Who do you like? Who would you want on your team?
Oh, got you. I got you.
Right.
Yeah, so I would be willing to go for Dak Prescott at that point.
And Commish, I did my ADP based on 12-man leagues because I'm in several 12-man leagues, and I'm right behind you. I had Dak last year in a 12-man league, and I was watching Dallas get behind by 21 and 24 points.
You're loving it.
Dak Prescott just put on a superhero cape, and it was ridiculous what this guy was doing. He's got another year with CeeDee Lamb. It actually is a good pass blocking offensive line. They weren't doing a good job running the ball there, and I don't know if they're still going to. And the defense got a little bit better. Still, to me, that defense isn't going to make huge leaps. We're going to see. But I'm right there with you. I have him at 55 in a 12-man league, and if he falls to me in like that 4th, 5th round, what he was doing last year was special, and I love him. If not, ironically, I got to tell you, Cyclop, I was right there on Matthew Stafford as well. He put up great numbers. It's a nice wait, 8th or 9th round if he's available. If you're going to fill up your receivers and running backs, I like Stafford late, but ironically, I'm right there with both of you on both of those selections.
So depending, of course, on what site you're looking at and what you're doing your draft, like I have Dak Prescott as ADP is 44. Now he also has the 23rd strength of schedule. So that shouldn't matter with him, right? He's got excellent receivers.
Yeah.
It should help, right? But is that defense remember that defense got a little bit better later in the year. So if they're a little bit better, it takes away a little bit of that having to catch up by 20, 24 points, in those games, which could.
But you're talking about that defense getting a little bit better. That's like saying syphilis is a little better than gonorrhea. I mean that's what you're saying there. That defense had gaping holes. Yes, I did just say syphilis, gonorrhea, and gaping holes on the show, ladies and gentlemen.
In the same sentence. Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, they all had good defenses, and it didn't make a difference, right?
True.
Right.
I think if you have the right scheme and you have the right arm, and we know Dak has it, Ezekiel Elliott might be a different person this year. We don't know. They're getting their offensive line back, so that'll protect Dak a little more. So I don't know. I'm excited. I'm actually scared now that 2020 is going to get them before I do in our league. But but let me ask you about Mahomes, guys. And I assume 2020 is he your consensus best quarterback as well?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so let's just go real quick. We don't have to think about it too long. Brad, where would you draft Mahomes? What round? Forget ADP, forget everything else. Where would you pick Mahomes?
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of it's the kind of thing. If you're sitting in that bottom half of the second round and he's there,
how do you not?
You take him. I mean, the guy just so consistently puts up,
So you're hoping
ridiculous
to
numbers.
have like McCaffrey and Mahomes as your first 2 picks.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
But hold on a second. Christian McCaffrey, I think, is still probably the consensus number one. In what league, 10 or 12 man, is Patrick Mahomes going to go at the end of the second round? That's never going to happen.
I don't know. It's possible if you have a lot of people who look. What happens in the first round if it's all running backs, right? Yeah, throw in a Devontae, throw in a Tyreek, but for the most part, let's say first and second round are just they got the run on running backs, and you've got to grab something. So forget number 1. Let's say you're another second or third pick, right? And coming back, Mahomes is there, but coming in the third round, your second running back is Chris Carson. Are you okay with that? Because the difference between, let's say, Mahomes and who else you might get a little later, whether it's Dak Prescott or whoever.
Well, that's why
later than getting Chris Carson or Josh Jacobs. I mean,
I agree, but not everyone is. People are a little worried about Prescott. He's flying a little under the radar. I totally hear what you're saying, and I agree. But you're talking about Mahomes. His ADP, depending upon 10 or 12 man league, is ranging anywhere from 11 to 13, 14. He starts slipping past middle of the second round. That's just going to be very hard for anyone to lay off of and not to say, wow.
The amazing thing is overall numbers for the year. Mahomes had 4,700 yards and change. Brady had 46. They were less than 100 yards difference.
Right, exactly.
Brady actually had 2 more touchdowns, and he also had 4 more interceptions. Now on the ground, Mahomes picked up some there. He had a couple touchdowns and over 300 yards rushing, but it's the consistency. I mean, the guy did not miss a game throwing a touchdown. He had, there was 2 games. He only had 1 touchdown. Then it was 2, 3, 4, 5 touchdowns a week. I mean, it's the consistency is what's so amazing about him and what puts his value, a little bit higher than these other quarterbacks that might have the same amount of yards or around the same touchdowns, but he's doing it week in, week out, not a big week and a bad week. And, so that's the difference when you're talking about a Patrick Mahomes.
All right, so moving on with our quarterback segment. We talked about the quarterback you'd like to have on your team based on their ADP. Again, based on their ADP, what quarterback are you absolutely avoiding? And I'll start with you, Commish.
Okay, the quarterback I'm absolutely avoiding is Joe Burrow. And we're talking about, and the reason I'm bringing up Burrow is because he is in some cases a top 10 quarterback. I see on the list that Cyclop put together, it has him at 11. I could see everybody on that list on my team. And let me just move the call banner for a second because you have Roethlisberger there at 15. I could see myself having any of these guys on my team except for Joe Burrow. And there's several reasons. 1, the injury. 2, that offensive line is dreadful. Almost as bad as Dallas's defense. So I don't see the upside in getting Burrow, even with Chase. I'm staying away from that offense. I'm staying away from Chase. I'm staying away from Burrow. I'm staying away from Mixon. It's just I'm not touching him this year.
I cannot agree more. I was blown away. Listen, Jamar Chase is a talent, and Burrow and Chase had an incredible connection. But if you can't block, you can't run, and you can't protect him, I don't know how they passed up on Penei Sewell. I think that was a huge mistake. I that's not my choice, but I agree with you. I'm staying very much away from a lot of that Cincinnati offense. Great response there.
That's good to know going into the draft.
You know something? Stop doing that. Both of you. Stop doing that. I'm going to quit the show. Cyclops, same question.
Stop doing what? Wait, what happened? I missed it.
You guys you're getting on my draft strategy. You now know if you want, Joe Mixon and I'm up before you. You know I'm not going to take him. But we also know that about you, Commish. All right, enough of that secret sauce type stuff. Cyclop, back at you. Again, based on ADP, Who do you want no part of?
You know, even though I put this list together and he's always consistent and always putting up numbers, I really don't want any part of Matt Ryan this year myself. Now, that doesn't mean, you know, he's down there like his ADP. I have him at around 115. You know, so we're talking about depending on how many, you know, how many teams in the league, you're talking about the 8th to 10th round. Not to say, and if he's there and some of these other quarterbacks are gone, and depending how my team is formulated at that point, that I don't take him. But I really would have I would take these other 14 quarterbacks before I took him.
Yeah, he's kind of worked his way into that QB2 spot, right? So last year he was available on a lot of waiver wires throughout the season, whether it was not being drafted or whether it was being dropped. And I agree. I think that there is still some life in Matty Ice's arm. The question is, are you willing as a fantasy football team owner to have him on your roster as a QB1? You've got to be desperate. There's got to be nothing else available for you to grab somebody like that. Now, having him as a backup to fill in for your bye weeks or, you know, when Russell Wilson gets hurt, fine. But I would agree with you on that one as well.
Yeah. And you look at his numbers, again, he had almost 4,600 yards. He had 26 touchdowns. He did have 11 interceptions. He had a couple rushing touchdowns. Again, he's going to be that fill-in quarterback. And it was weird last year. He was just kept showing up on the waiver wire. But he didn't have a great year, but he ended the year strong. So yeah, I really don't want a big part of him this year. I think they do have decent receivers. They pick up Mike Davis, not too exciting, but yeah, that's my guy.
No, I happen to agree with you. He's a late rounder, but again, he's just really, really starting to his fantasy numbers and his overall NFL performance has been consistently going down. For myself.
I'm sorry. Let's get to this question here from Anthony. Wants to know if it's too early to doom Tua, and will Waddle & Fuller give him a fantasy boost? What do you guys think? I have my thoughts already, but
well, I mean, to doom him, he hasn't even. All he had is OTAs. Way too early to doom him. Again, remember, this is a guy that had a serious hip injury.
Hold on. I just want to tailor this. I'm sorry, Keith. I don't mean to cut you up. I want to tailor it toward fantasy football, though. Okay.
No, but it is.
Go ahead. No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So totally from a fantasy perspective, you know, you can't look at last year and use that as a representation of what's going to happen this year. And I know Herbert also had no, you know, preseason and what have you, but Tua has an enormous amount of weapons. I wouldn't doom him. I don't know that I would want him as a QB1. He's certainly not a QB1, but no, I wouldn't doom him. We got to see what's going to happen. I think he's got an enormous amount of weapons. He's got a much better offensive line. I love Liam Eichenberg, so it's a wait and see. I wouldn't doom him. It's definitely a wait and see.
Brad, what do you think?
You know, as far as Tua goes, what I think you're looking at here is like a sleeper, right? You're going to pick him up as a second quarterback with potential upside, right? All of a sudden, could he explode? Yes. You know, do we see that happening? We hope, right? As I know you want to leave it as fantasy, but as Dolphin fans, of course, we hope that happens. I've been saying all along, I don't see it. I didn't see it when they drafted him. I know you guys were on me about that. That's okay, right? We all see different things. I don't really see it. I'm hopeful. Maybe there's something that kind of clicks in there, and he's able to start making those mid to deep passes, and he's gotten some weapons. So maybe he'd be a great, like, just pull onto your bench late in the draft and see what happens the first few weeks. But, you know, that's the kind of player he's going to be. All of a sudden, he could be putting up 350. You know, like you say, you talked about Will Fuller before, Commish. And if he can put some fire into that offense, he's a game changer on that field because he can stretch the field.
Well, same thing with Waddle. Just dump the ball off for him for 6 yards and let him take it for 20.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got a lot of game changers on that team.
So the problem may not just be with Tua, but that Dolphins offense as a whole, right?
Right.
They have different offensive coordinator this year, so they're learning. He's learning a new
offense
on top of everything else, a new offense, which is probably going to be more pass oriented, more geared towards what Tua can and cannot do.
Hopefully,
last year the Dolphins were 20th in the league in passing. They were only passing for 233 yards a game, and that's even when Fitzy was in. So it's more than just Tua, right? It was it was that offense, and things are going to change. So I couldn't agree with Brad more. I think Tua does have the potential. I think the ceiling is very high. I think we're at the floor on him,
right.
but the ceiling is very high. And if you are able to grab one of those top 5 quarterbacks, let's say that were on that list, sure, grab Tua. If you have the luxury of having that extra pick, then yeah. I mean, Waddle and Fuller are going to get their catches. And don't forget Parker. Parker and Fuller are really going to be the guys from Miami. Parker's already had that relationship with Tua. They've already established that chemistry. Waddle's going to be great. I think he's going to step in. I think he's going to be he's not going to do as well as Devontae. We already talked about that on our first show. They're going to get their yards, and so is Tua.
And don't forget about Gesicki. He's starting to become a nice safety valve with a lot of chemistry with Tua towards the end before he got injured.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
All right. So for me, the guy that I'm avoiding, certainly based on ADP, again, just based on ADP, is Lamar Jackson. We have him ranked. I have him ranked, and I see him as the 4th or 5th quarterback off the board. I know you here have him at 7th, but based on the variety of leagues, I just don't. I mean, if I could get Lamar Jackson in the 8th or 9th round, I'm certainly not going to say no, but he's never going to be available in the 8th or 9th round. So based on what it would cost, what it would take to get him on my team, I just don't want him. I want no part of him in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and that's kind of the average of where he's going. Too high for me. I don't see the value there. So want no part of that. I don't know if you guys want to comment on that.
Let me ask you a question. How many games last year, and he missed one game, did he throw for less than 200 yards?
Most of them, but that's not. But that's
No,
not the point.
I understand.
Right? He had 26 touchdowns, and he ended the season very strong. And that's not even talking about his rushing on top of that, with over 1,000 yards rushing. So
and 7 rushing touchdowns. No, right. I get that. I get that a lot of the points come on the ground. But as far as a quarterback, I'm just looking at quarterback without rushing statistics.
Football, though, you've got to look at this.
I understand.
Where are you going to put him?
Listen, again, we're talking about what it's going to take to draft him. If to get to what I want to spend a 3rd or a 4th round pick, and in some leagues, people might even go higher than that to get him, and that's his ADP. Absolutely not.
I have his ADP at 52. What do you have it at?
So I'm thinking 12-man league. So 12, that's like 4th or 5th
round. ADP of 52, but yeah.
I have him as 45.
Okay.
Right. So 4th or 5th round, which still, but to me, I'd rather wait and get a Tom Brady. Which, by the way, you just talked about him. How eerily close was Brady's numbers without the yards, rushing yards or touchdowns to Patrick Mahomes? And this is a guy that I can get a couple rounds later and get my wide receiver 2 in the 4th, 5th, or 6th round and not have to go that high to get a Lamar Jackson. That's all I'm saying. Based on ADP, I would wait and take a Stafford, take a Brady, get a Russell Wilson, something like that, versus spending that high of a pick.
I love how in Baltimore they're kind of touting getting Sammy Watkins on the roster is going to be this big boost. I mean,
okay,
right? I mean, they're like, oh, they got Sammy Watkins. I mean, the guy can't stay healthy for more than a quarter.
I was just going to say, if he can stay healthy, he's not a bad guy to have.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Big if. So that really rounds out the quarterback segment. We were talking about who do we think is going to underperform and who do we think is going to overperform. And quite honestly, Commish, you're right in our discussions earlier, really talking about their ADP positions and who do we want or not want. I think really did kind of cover that. So
I have a question though, guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
What are you doing with Deshaun Watson if your draft is next week? What are you doing?
Oh,
seriously, you got a list of 15 in front of you. What are you doing?
So when I made this list, I left him off purposefully. He wants to be traded. They don't want to trade him. They
probably do, but they know that the trade value is like nothing right now.
It's low because another team doesn't want to bring on the media, right?
Right.
The circus that comes with it.
Right.
We know there's teams that would love him, right? Denver would probably love him at this point.
They're trying.
Right? Why wouldn't you want Deshaun Watson there, except for the fact that it's a media nightmare, and he could be suspended. That hasn't been discussed, finalized yet. So there's a lot of things going on with Deshaun Jackson. At this point, if my draft was tomorrow, I am not putting him on my team unless it's like a situation of, picking him up as my second quarterback in the, last round or final couple rounds of the draft as just a stash on the roster just in case.
But here's a question for you then. How do you have Aaron Rodgers listed as your sixth quarterback? The ambiguousness between Watson is equally as ambiguous as it is with Rodgers, where he might not take another snap in Green Bay. He's talking about possibly sitting out. So, I mean, would you take Aaron Rodgers?
But he's not in a situation of trouble with the law, trouble with being suspended. It's different things, and I understand he may not play anymore either. I think it's a cat and mouse game with him right now. That's my personal opinion. I think he will play.
Cyclop, same question. Your draft is tomorrow. You're in your sixth round, or maybe even seventh round. Let's say that. You've got your running backs, you got your wideouts, you got a good tight end. You need a quarterback.
But that's why I put Aaron Rodgers at 6, and he could have gone down to 7 or 8 or 9.
But would you take him with not having crystal ball?
Tomorrow, I don't know. I probably wouldn't take him as my 6th quarterback tomorrow. I'd probably take him closer to where I'd be drafting 2 quarterbacks close together, like in maybe like the 9th or 10th round, where I'm going to go Aaron Rodgers and then get my backup, which might be like, Ryan Tannehill or Tom Brady, and get someone else that I think could be consistent in case Rodgers doesn't play.
Well, I got two points about that. First of all, when you're talking about teams that have or leagues that have team quarterback, right? You have a better option as the Green Bay quarterback, because at that point, if Rodgers doesn't play, yes, it's Jordan Love, but you know that you're going to get at least some quarterback play. He's not going to be a QB1 for you. But the difference between Rodgers and Watson, like Brad said, because of the legal issues, we know that if Rodgers doesn't play for Green Bay, he's going to play for somebody and he's going to do well for somebody. We don't know that with Watson. We don't know if Watson, even if Watson gets traded to Miami or wherever else he might end up going, he'll even play this year.
Right.
So there's a much bigger risk there. But you know what? I'm taking him before I take my 5th receiver. I'm taking him before I take my 2nd tight end. I'm taking him before I take my 2nd defense.
Right.
If he's available in 10th round, 11th round, hell yes, I'm taking him.
Yeah, too much
that's if it's next week. Obviously, we'll find out more as time goes on.
All right, very good. All right, so to round out our quarterback segment today, something we're going to do on the show, it's something we're going to do every week. Each one of us is going to come up with a little fun segment off the cuff that we haven't done before. So tonight we're going to play Who Am I? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe to you 5 people, and both of you, Cyclop, Commish, whoever chimes in first. We don't have a magic buzzer like they do in the Family Feud, but we're going to see if either one of you or both of you can get it in our first ever Who Am I segment on the Fantasy Football Buzz podcast. All right, so strap in. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Who am I? Last year in 2020, I led the league in yards passing.
I like how you did that.
You saw that? Second highest passer rating as well. I only had 7 picks to 33 touchdowns. I had more passes of 20-plus yards than any other.
Slow your roll.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay.
It's okay. Seven picks.
33 touchdowns.
33 touchdowns and 7 picks. But the real discriminate the specificity here is led the league in passing yards, second highest passer rating, and had more passes of 20 plus yards than any other quarterback. And I had the second highest passer rating in the league. Who am I?
Kyler Murray.
That is incorrect. You lose $100. Oh, did I forget to mention that?
Oh, damn.
I forgot to mention that. Sorry, my bad.
I think you jumped on it a little too quickly there.
Well, it's like a speed round.
What do you got,
All right,
Commish?
let's see. 33.
I have absolutely no idea. 33 touchdowns.
He led
7 picks.
he led the league in passer.
Led the league in yards.
Yards?
And he was second. Yep. And second highest in passer rating.
Oh, was it Deshaun?
That's exactly right, Deshaun Watson. And he might not even play for the same team this year. If I'd have said that, it just would have been too easy. But yes, Deshaun Watson, good call.
Wow. Well, look, let's remember, especially if Watson does come back, who's he throwing to besides Brandon Cooks?
Really good point.
Kuti.
Oh yeah, Kiki Cutie. So right. So without Will Fuller leaves a big hole in that offense. So
really does.
And I don't know. And next week we'll hear from Kenneth, and when Kenneth comes on, we'll ask him, or in 2 weeks if we don't do the show next week, about that, because I know that's his team. But very interesting.
All right, you guys ready? Here we go. Strap in for number 2. Who am I? Last year, I threw for 4,084 yards and 26 touchdowns with 10 picks. Had a great passer rating of 96.3. And this year, I did so good last year, I'm playing for a different team. Who am I?
How many touchdowns?
26 touchdowns.
26 touchdowns.
Stafford.
4,084 yards, only 10 picks, high passer rating. And this year, I'm playing for a different team.
With Stafford.
Good job, Commish. It is Matthew Stafford. Excellent. You got Cyclops $100. You're not doing too good here, Cyclops. Okay. Who am I? 2020 was a down year for me.
Cam Newton.
You just lost another $100. You want to let me finish? So it was a down year for me. 7 weeks, nearly half the season, I scored less than 14 fantasy points. 3 of those weeks were super duds. I scored less than 10 points. I only had 6 weeks north of 20 points. Yet, I still put up over almost 4,600 yards and 26 touchdowns with 11 interceptions and a 93.3 quarterback rating. And I was the QB 12. Who am I?
I've got 2 guesses.
What was the yard? What was the yards?
4,581 yards, 26 touchdowns, and nearly half the season, 7 weeks, I put up less than 14 points. 3 of those, I put up less than 10 points.
Drew Brees.
Only 6 weeks, more than 20 fantasy points.
Either Drew Brees or Phillip Rivers, my guess.
I play both of those are incorrect.
Ben Roethlisberger?
Also incorrect.
Well, without looking up any stats, I think had a down year that we expected them to have good years. So without looking at stats, which I'm not doing because that's cheating, I don't know who did well and then all of a sudden had a down year. So I don't have.
And again, it's 2020 was a down year for me. Because again, it was that inconsistency.
Carson Wentz
of less than 14 points. No, but here's where I thought you guys would get it. 3 of my weeks, I had super duds, less than 10 points, and people were cutting me all over fantasy football because of that.
Matt Ryan,
exactly right. As off a year as he had.
Funny, I was actually going to guess that at first, and then I.
But it's crazy because I had Matty Ice, and he was dreadful. Yet you go back and you look, he put up 45-81, 26 touchdowns, and a 93, and he was a QB 12. But he had monster weeks and then just dud weeks, and that's fantasy football. You want that consistency. All right, here's another one. Of all the quarterbacks
You
that
didn't say
started,
who am I first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who am I? Thank you. Of all the quarterbacks that started all 16 games last year, I threw the least amount of passes, but still put up 33 touchdowns, which was good for 7th best in the NFL. Who am I?
Ryan
Didn't we
Tannehill.
already say Deshaun?
Ryan Tannehill. Excellent. Very good job, Cyclop. Okay. And our last Who Am I of the evening. Who am I? Last year was arguably my best year. I entered the league in 2012, became a starter in 2015. Since then, since 2015, I've missed a total of 1 game. Last year was my best year in the league, where I put up 4,265 yards and 35 touchdowns with only 13 interceptions and a 105 quarterback rating. However, after the 2017 season, which was arguably my second best year, putting up 4,100 yards and 27 touchdowns, my team let me walk.
Kirk
Who
Cousins.
am I? Kirk Cousins. Good job.
Kirk Cousins. Yeah.
Excellent.
You got, yeah, I
Excellent.
got. I mean, I knew it was 2012, but I wasn't sure until you said that at the end when he got dropped by the Redskins. I'm sorry, by the were the Redskins at the time.
There was the Redskins at the time. So, you know what? Hold on. I have one more. I
Was Derek
apologize.
Carr? What year was Derek Carr drafted?
Derek
I think
Carr.
it's 7 years ago now.
It's got to be about the same.
2013. Yeah.
8 years, 20. Yeah, I think it was 2013.
All right. I have one more. On here. It was just too much fun to not this. Who am I? I'm a former first-round pick. And last year, before I got injured, I had the triple crown. I led the league in interceptions, fumbles, and sacks.
Joe Burrow.
No. Before I got injured, I led the league in interceptions, fumbles, and sacks.
Well, I was just thinking of who got injured. First round.
Matt Stafford?
Nope.
First round.
I'll give you a hint. This year, he is playing for a new team.
First round.
And you'll
Sam
remember
Darnold.
it because it was crazy last year.
Sam Darnold?
The amount of turnovers that was happening because of him. It was like a circus, the amount of turnovers that was
he
happening.
singing Ghost?
Sam Darnold?
No.
Goff?
No.
Wentz.
Correct. Wentz. He led the league before he got injured. At that point, the triple crown: interceptions, fumbles, and sacks. Good luck in Indy.
I like that. That was a nice segment.
Yeah,
In Indy.
Glad you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, Carson Wentz is one.
Oh, Wentz, right.
Yeah. So that's going to round us out on our quarterback segments. I'm very much looking forward to next week, where I think we're probably going to do something very similar. I'm assuming with running backs would make the next most sense.
Right.
Well,
We're just not sure if it's going to be next week or the week after, and we'll let everybody know what we're doing on that. And we'll jump into running backs next week. And of course, we'll have the Kenneth question of the night. We'll have our running back segment, probably throw a trivia question, and maybe even keep up with the Who Am I, but with these other positions. So that was really good.
I like that. That was fun.
Glad you guys loved it.
All right. So in the meantime, while we are not here, of course, anybody can go onto our YouTube page or our Facebook page. They can leave a comment. We answer, even if we're not doing our podcast, we still try to get back to all of you. So go ahead and visit our site, like our pages, do what you have to do. Follow us on Twitter, but we are around. And if we're not going to be here next week, we'll let everybody know through our pages, and we'll be here the week after. Guys, anything you want to say before the end of the evening?
I would like to go back to the trivia question.
Okay.
And I'm gonna throw out a guess. I don't know if he was drafted or not. I think he was. So
the question is: we're the only 3 wide receivers who caught 100+ passes in a season who were never originally drafted before coming to the league. In other words, they were free agent draft picks.
Was Wes Welker one of them?
Wes Welker was one of
Yes.
them.
Oh, wow.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I did not know if he was drafted or not. Okay, so I got one.
Was Tony Martin another?
No. Okay. So I'll give you another hint. Two. Up. We got a call. Could this be? This is Kenneth. What's up, Kenneth?
I'd like to get in on the trivia question myself because I believe I might have a couple of guesses.
Okay.
Would one of them happen to be one Wes Welker?
Yes.
Yeah, we just said that.
Yes. Brad said Wes Welker, so that's one of them. Do you have any other guesses?
What about one Adam Thielen?
Adam Thielen is correct.
Yeah.
I can't think of the third, but those were the first two
So-
that immediately came to my mind.
Seth, the third one. It was an Atlanta receiver, correct?
No, he was a Denver Bronco, and he did it twice.
Oh,
Rod
Thomas.
Smith.
Rod Smith.
Rod Smith.
That's correct.
Rod Smith.
One of you
So
said
I
Rod
got
Smith.
two of them.
Good job,
Two
Kenneth.
of them correct.
Yes,
Good
you
job,
did.
Kenneth.
All
Kenneth,
right,
just for
Kenneth.
that, you could do another
All right.
question of the week.
Exactly. Good question.
Take care.
Thanks.
All right,
All right.
guys.
All right,
For
nice.
me, I hear the rain outside. There goes my walk for the night, but it's okay. I had a good time tonight, and we'll catch you guys either next week or the week after, but we will let you know.
All right, awesome, guys.
All right,
Have a good
take
week.
care.
Bye.
Have a good night, guys.